Hey friends, Ash here with Gents. Today I'm doing one of those videos where I'm just talking to you guys about a subject. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so I wanted to do another one. Today's subject, or what I'm going to be talking about, is falling out of love with fragrances, with perfumes, colognes, fragrances in general. Just not really being into them as much as you used to for one reason or another, and recapturing that love. So let's jump into this. Let me get this out of the way right at the beginning. I'm not falling out of love with fragrances myself. I'm not disillusioned with fragrances or anything like that. It's not a chore for me to talk about fragrances. But I know the way that things can go when it comes to collecting fragrances or getting into them, or really anything. I mean, it could be collecting shoes, collecting watches, collecting anything. At some point, it seems like for a lot of guys, it becomes more about the thrill of purchasing something new and getting something new in, rather than enjoying what you have or what got you to the point that you're at. So for a lot of guys, they're not even happy anymore with fragrances. It's always buying something new, buying something new, buying something new. You gotta have a new haul coming in. You gotta have a new fragrance coming in, whatever. And if you don't have that endorphin rush of getting something new in, then you're not really happy with where your collection is at or where you're at. And obviously that can be really destructive. That can lead to debt. That can lead to just not even being happy with fragrances in general. You could be like this and have tons of fragrances to choose from and still be like, man, I gotta get that new one in. And at that point, you're no longer really enjoying your fragrances. So it's, like I said, very destructive. So I just want to talk about what you might be able to maybe do to help you recapture some of that love of scent or fragrance, cologne, perfume, whatever you want to call it. So one of the first things I would say is maybe slow down on buying. Like I said, this can become just a big rush of purchase after purchase after purchase after purchase, which leads to hundreds of dollars and then possibly thousands of dollars of debt. And I know there are so many releases every year, trust me, I'm fully aware. And there are so many thousands of releases that have come out in the past. And people will talk about all these different scents. You've got to check this one out. You got to smell this one. You've got to smell that one. If you like this one, you got to get that one. And it leads to this fear of missing out, where you don't want to be without these fragrances that everybody else is saying, oh my God, it's amazing. And like I said before, it could be like that with anything: shoes, watches, video games, I mean, on and on and on and on. But it can be destructive to get sucked into that. So if you've gotten into this habit where you're just buying, and it's not even really making you feel fulfilled or happy anymore, dial that back. You know, set a limit as to how many fragrances you can purchase per month and stick to it. And then hopefully that will allow you to step back a little bit and take in more of what you've already accumulated and get to know those better. And going along with that a little bit, not having to buy everything new, or collect all the big fragrances everyone says you need to own. Go back, revisit the fragrances that got you into fragrance in the first place. So for example, something like Dracar Noir for me, or Acqua di Gio, or even Field Notes from Paris. These are fragrances that at one point in my life were extremely important to me. Go back and revisit them, wear them, you know, spray them and smell them. Remember why you got into fragrance in the first place. Go back to those old comfortable spots, those old comfortable scents, and relive that. And kind of going off of that, revisit fragrances that make you think or remind you of people, of places, of things that are important to you or were important to you. Even if it's something from like your teenage years, if it brings you back a little bit, makes you feel that nostalgia, that rush from smelling that fragrance again, recapture that essence, you know, recapture that love, because that's probably one of the reasons that you got into fragrances to begin with. Because at some point in time, you smelled something on somebody, or you smelled something that, again, reminded you of a place or a time in your life. And those things can be very powerful. Smelling a fragrance that reminds you of your grandfather or your father, your brother, your sister, your ex, your wife, your girlfriend, whoever. Those things can be very powerful. And so for me, when I smell Acqua di Gio, it reminds me of when I was a teenager, when I was working in the mall, all the things that I was doing around that time. It reminds me of old friends that I've lost touch with. It reminds me of acquaintances that I used to see every day, and it seemed like at the time, I was always going to have those opportunities to make new relationships with people, whether friendships or otherwise. But slowly time marched on, and obviously things went the way they did, and I'm sure a lot of you out there can connect with that. And when I smell Acqua di Gio, it brings me back. It reminds me of how I felt then, and it could do the same for you, or not necessarily Acqua di Gio, but whatever fragrance or fragrances are embedded up there. And going further with that, spend more time with what you've already got. Wear these fragrances out and about. Wear them daytime, nighttime, summer, spring, winter, fall, all sorts of different situations. And you may find out that some fragrances that you own already, that you may have written off, actually could be your potential signature scent down the road, or one of them. And I'm guilty of that as well. I mean, look at all this stuff I have. Do you think I can wear all these fragrances all the time? No, especially not with all the new fragrances constantly coming out. Sometimes it's really beneficial to step back and revisit a fragrance that you bought months ago or even years ago and never gave a fair shake. Wear those fragrances. See how they work. Sometimes you might find a fragrance, again, that you overlooked, that you wrote off too quickly. Maybe you sprayed it on and the first time you wore it, you said, that's not for me. And you just set it aside and bought something new. Or maybe you bought something and you liked it, or were maybe unsure, and then you saw a review and somebody said, oh, this fragrance sucks, and you just took their opinion as fact and you said, oh, well, if they say it sucks, it's gotta suck, and you just put it to the side. Revisit that. It may work for you. Somebody else might not like it, but that doesn't matter. If you like it, that's what matters. So go back, revisit what you already have. Give fragrances multiple wearings that maybe you wrote off. You might find a hidden gem somewhere in your own collection. You might not even know it yet. And also understand what you love in fragrances and explore that further. Be comfortable with what you like. It doesn't matter if it's different from what most people out there would like, from the mainstream. If your tastes are a little bit different, that's a-okay. Actually, that's great. Embrace that. If you realize that you really love old school barbershop fragrances, awesome. Go down that path. If that's your path, walk it. It doesn't matter if the new Y is an amazing compliment pulling fragrance. If that's not what makes you happy, that type of fragrance, then don't worry about keeping up with everybody else as they buy it. Do your own thing. And by that same token, if you do love blue fragrances, compliment pulling fragrances, loud fragrances, beast mode fragrances, whatever, even if it's the most mass marketed fragrance out there, if that's what makes you happy, that's ultimately what's most important. So understand what you like and really think about that, marinate on that, and walk your own path. Just because a YouTuber or somebody on Fragrantica or Base Notes or in a book or whatever says you must own this fragrance, if it's not a fragrance that's gonna make you happy, don't worry about buying it. Don't spend the money on it. Spend money on what's going to make you happy. Ultimately, at the end of the day, all of us have our own fragrance journey that we're on, if you want to call it that. And we're all going to take different paths that go different ways, and that's okay. If finding hidden gem cheap fragrances of a particular type of scent is what makes you happy, you do you. If buying artisanal oud fragrances makes you happy, knock yourself out. That's awesome. But don't feel like you have to conform at all. Whatever you want to wear, whatever makes you happy, wear it. Just try to sometimes maybe take a step back and understand, what is it that I like? Doesn't matter what everybody else is saying, what everybody else is doing. What makes you happy? That's what you should do. I was just thinking about this the other day and wanted to put this video out there. I've been collecting for years, and there have been times where I've needed to step back and kind of revisit some of these fragrances that remind me of particular places, particular people, and smell those fragrances that really set everything into motion. Because it's easy sometimes to forget where all this came from, the passion, the love for these fragrances. And I've talked about it numerous times on the channel, the formative fragrances that I had as I was growing up that were gifted to me, that really got me into it. But sometimes it's really beneficial to just take a step back, not worry about the super expensive niche fragrances or what the new stuff is that's coming out, not to worry about that, and just to take a step back and revisit things and relive things for a second to kind of stoke the fires, I guess. And for a lot of younger guys out there, these new releases that are coming out now, a decade from now, 2 decades from now, these are the fragrances that you'll look back on and you'll be like, wow, when I smell Y eau de parfum or whatever, it reminds me of this person, reminds me of this place, reminds me of this time in my life. And sometimes it's nice to spray a fragrance on and relive that. Just remember why you love things. Don't get caught up so much in having to spend. Because ultimately, you're throwing money into a hole and it's not really good for you. All right, guys, it's gonna do it for me. Thanks so much. Stay safe out there. See you tomorrow.